it's going to do, and it is crucial that we get it right.
I call the Honourable Member Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Talofa lava. I rise to take a call on the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Bill. Mr Speaker, the Green Party has long recognised the need for environmental management regime for the oceans, and we support the intent of an EEZ bill, but we can't support this weak, flawed and overly permissive bill. It's vitally important, Mr Speaker, we get this right. The regime we establish is likely to remain in effect for years, and like the RMA, we need a durable solution to provide certainty for business, for iwi, for communities, for Kiwis. Now, New Zealand's got the 5th largest EEZ bill in the world. It's internationally significant, and Mr Speaker, it's an environment we know so little about. New Zealanders, we love our oceans. It's where we fish, it's where we play, it's where we get our spiritual sustenance from. We take pleasure from the animals and the environment. It's an environment, though, where drillers hope to drill deep, deep, deep for oil, where Chatham phosphate winnow literally suck up kilometres of the sea floor to find phosphate. It's where other companies want to start mining the hydrothermal vents and methane hydrates. Now, as I think the member Chris Hipkins was interjecting there, it's true we supported the bill in the first reading because we support the intent of EEZ legislation. We've been calling for it for 12 years. It's good to finally have it. We tried to make it better in Select Committee. We supported the numerous submitters that supported, like us, the intent of the bill, but not the bill in praxis, the bill as it was drafted and the bill that we've seen come out of Select Committee. Because ultimately, Mr Speaker, our economy depends on our environment, and this bill is all about facilitating activities to occur like risky deep-sea drilling. This bill is called the EEZ bill, but really it should be called the EZ drilling bill, because this is what this bill is facilitating. There are numerous reasons why the Green Party is opposed from the bill. The fact that it fails our international obligations, it does prioritise economic development over those environmental considerations, it fails to take into account climate change full stop. It contributes to uncertainty around the drafting, along with the precautionary approach. It fails to meet our Treaty of Waitangi obligations, fails the principles of natural justice, contains woefully inadequate penalties, meaning the taxpayer's going to have to pick up the tab when there's an accident, and it simply ignores marine protection. But before I want to go into the bill, I'd like to thank submitters, thank the officials who worked on it. I'd like to acknowledge the Select Committee Chair, Nikki Wagner, but I've got to lament the Select Committee process. Here we saw the 6 national members almost uniformly vote against any amendment put forward by an environmentalist or a legal expert or the Green Party, yet when you look on the other side, all the amendments supported by industry, it's tick, tick, tick. An absolutely biased process, and they call it a balance, which is the most shocking irony of the whole process. As we saw, because it was a split vote on the committee, 6 national members and 3 Labour members, 2 Greens and a New Zealand First. We saw the bill reported back from the committee, not supported by the committee. All the amendments the government wanted to put up simply couldn't go through because of that split vote. So I'd like to acknowledge everyone who engaged, but I'd like to point out it was a deeply flawed process. We haven't seen a better bill come out of Select Committee as a result. So the first critique of the bill is the bill's weighting in favour of economic development over environmental responsibility to protect and preserve. The bill makes deep-sea drilling almost certainly to be approved, and I haven't heard any member from National say to the contrary, and this brings with it the spectre of a catastrophic oil spill. It's not academic anymore for New Zealanders, because as we've seen after the RENA, oil on our beaches is something Kiwis have tasted, they've smelt it, they've seen it, they've touched it, and the government, in a very surprising move, is currently consulting on the regulations for this bill, which is only at its 2nd reading now. They're consulting on a bill which hasn't even reached the committee stage, and what they're proposing to do is make risky deep-sea drilling discretionary activity. But I've got to point out that no rules, no amount of consultation, no amount of government legislation is ever going to plug a deep-sea well blowout and the corresponding catastrophic oil spill. The only way we can protect our waters, our tourism, our aquaculture industries, our beaches, is to make risky deep-sea drilling a prohibited activity. As the petroleum lobby in New Zealand says, the only thing we can do facing an oil spill is focus on beach cleanups. This legislation is not going to stop a spill. In fact, it's going to make it more likely, as it simply makes deep-sea drilling EZ. Now, the Minister, I think, incorrectly pointed to our international obligations. Now, numerous submitters, I'd say the majority, including the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, said the bill is not consistent with our international obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Now, the only reason we get to use our EEZ and continental shelf is because of UNCLOS, the international convention, and with that right comes the responsibility to preserve and protect those three key words of the marine environment. The drafting changes of the Select Committee, in fact, make it weaker. We need to be explicit. If the government wants to be consistent with UNCLOS, let's say it. Let's say this bill is consistent with their obligations under UNCLOS. If that's the fact, they shouldn't be scared of putting it in the legislation. The key clause in the bill, Mr. Speaker, is Clause 10, which sets out the purpose of the bill. Now, the bill tries to enshrine this National Party ideological fixation with balance, which is the whole idea that you can balance a bit of environmental degradation against a little bit of economic development. For us, it's a false dichotomy. A healthy economy relies on a healthy environment. It's that simple. The bill fails to acknowledge entirely there are any environmental limits, there are any environmental bottom lines, and as Simon Terry points out, the bill is a bit like a jellyfish. You know, it's a bill that's got no spine. There are no bottom lines. A key couple of phrases in the drafting of the bill is that decision makers are only required to take into account matters such as the protection of biological diversity and integrity of marine systems and ecosystem processes. They're not required, as they are under the RMA, to recognise and provide. Now, these are key drafting terms because to recognise and provide is a lot stronger than simply to take into account, as the national government would have the EPA board do when they're considering their applications. Now, the bill essentially leaves all the key decisions up to the EPA board. This is the board nominated by the National Party, and I've got no confidence in a National Party stacked board to make the right decision when it comes to our precious marine environment. And an astounding move, we're seeing perhaps the most dangerous part of the bill, is the complete failure to take climate change into account. In fact, the bill specifically prevents the EPA from considering the effects of discharging greenhouse gases. Here we've got the most pressing environmental issue facing us in the world. This government wants to drill more than 3 kilometres deep, dig up literally hundreds of tonnes of oil, thousands of tonnes, and the government doesn't want to take greenhouse gas. It's the most short-sighted and dangerous part of this bill, and it shows that this government's got its head in the sand under climate change. And as we saw in the estimates and the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, which this government should be absolutely embarrassed about, we see the ETS cost in the estimates today, $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion is the annual cost of the emissions trading scheme recently revealed by this government. It's a shame, it's a tragedy, Mr. Speaker, and this bill, as it is drafted, treats as if the planet just didn't matter. So I'm going to quickly race through for my last 2 minutes. We see the precautionary approach replaced with this novel term just plucked out of nowhere, the favour caution language used in the bill, which is simply going to lead to increased uncertainty. It's going to be a feeding frenzy for lawyers as we ditch the internationally understood and case law developed precautionary principle. We saw some changes to the Treaty of Waitangi Clause. We didn't go far enough to commit to the treaty. The bill ignores natural justice. There's no ability to...
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair. This debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. Thursday, the 31st of May 2012. Haere rā, po marie, tau whā sui fua. Good evening.